Tonight is Monday, July 10th, 2017. It is 7 o'clock p.m. This is the regular city council meeting for the city of St. Peter. We will call the meeting to order. All please join in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Everyone should have a copy of the agenda in front of them. Are there any changes or corrections to the agenda? Seeing none, is there a motion for approval?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second. Everyone in favor of the agenda as it appears, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda is approved. Next, we will go to the minutes. Minutes from our June 26, 2017 meeting appear on pages 4 through 8. Are there any changes or correction to those minutes? If not, is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Is there a
Second.
Thank you. All in favor of the minutes as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. First up tonight, we have a public hearing for the Mason Street vacation request, and Mr. Willie.
Mayor, members, if I can, just a quick reminder about the rules for the public hearing. The order of activity is that there's usually a staff report, then there's an opportunity for presentation from folks who want to address the council related to the hearing. The applicant typically has an opportunity to do a presentation first and then the public. In this instance, the city council is the applicant for this street vacation at Mason Street. After the hearing is over, the mayor can gavel it closed or close the meeting if there's action to be taken. It's not always at the same meeting, but in this instance there's action that's requested by staff, recommended by staff tonight. The council usually refrains from engaging in a discussion with the folks that are here to testify. The goal is for the folks that are here to testify that they present factual information to the council, and the council considers it as it makes its decision later in the meeting. So with that, Russ, I'll turn it over to you on Mason Street.
First, we will open this public hearing at 7:03 p.m. for the Mason Street vacation. Mr. Willie.
Mayor Zeman, members of the City Council, you have petitioned yourself for the partial vacation of the Mason Street right-of-way within the North Industrial Park. The North Industrial Park is comprised of the former St. Peter Airport site, which had previously been subject to an industrial plat, but no construction. In 2002, then, it was determined that the plat was insufficient and it was going to be altered, and at that point, the North Industrial Park was platted. North Industrial Park, as you're aware, is the home to the River Edge Hospital campus and a couple of industrial properties and businesses that are out there. At that point that Mason Street was platted, it was anticipated that Mason Street then would be continued to the east to provide a third outlet to the existing North Industrial Park. Future outlets to the North Industrial Park would be accomplished to the north with an extension of Klein Street and Sunrise Drive, which would then plan to connect with North Washington Avenue, extended north of its current location, and then making a left turn, ultimately connecting to County Road 20. At the time that the North Industrial Park was platted, it was determined that it was in need of additional stormwater service, and so there was a gravel pit immediately to the east of the North Industrial Park, and the city coveted that to provide for the stormwater drainage of the park. At that point, the 40 acres adjoining the North Industrial Park to the east was acquired. It was determined that the 9 or 11 acre pond site would be used to serve North Industrial Park, and the balance of the property then would be developed as Washington Terrace, which is a subdivision based upon the Building Better Neighborhoods program, similar to Washington Terrace, as well as the current Traverse Green, which is underway. At the time that Washington Terrace built, it was determined that it would not be advantageous to extend Mason Street, and so the Washington Terrace plat does not accommodate an extension of Mason Street to the east. It would have been undesirable to introduce the heavy vehicular traffic into a single-family residential neighborhood with the pedestrian or largely children conflicts. With no future planned outlet, the undeveloped portion of Mason Street is determined to be unnecessary for the future development. This is one step then. If the Mason Street is vacated, then it's anticipated that the vacated portion of Mason Street would be combined with the remnant of Lot 3, Block 3, to create an additional lot then that would meet all the requirements of the zoning ordinance, the development regulations, and be available for sale. The Planning Commission considered the matter at their July 6th meeting, and the Planning Commission has recommended that you would accomplish the vacation as you have petitioned. Mayor, it's appropriate for you to undertake a public hearing at this time, but I'd ask or answer any questions that you or members of the council may have.
Anything for Russ? He'll be back later if we think of something else.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Russ. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak in favor of the vacation of this Mason Street request? Seeing no one, is there anyone that would like to speak in opposition? Seeing no one, we will close this public hearing at 7:07 p.m. Next, we will move on to visitors. Is there anyone, visitors in the audience, that would like to speak on any agenda item whatsoever? Seeing no one, is there anyone that would like to speak to the council on any general comments at all? Seeing Mr. Peters, I think you would like to say something at this point, maybe?
Thank you, Mayor. Members of the council, it's not on the agenda for some reason. Why I'm here tonight is to present Officer Joshua Clacius with a life-saving award that I'm sure many of you have already heard about. I am going to pass around for you to look at what is the presentation from the FBI Law Enforcement Bulletin. This was published in their magazine. And you can just pass it around, take a look at it while I read the citation. Before I do that, I just wanted to point out a couple things. Joshua comes to us, well, Josh is an Eagle Scout. He graduated, I think the first in your class in high school, and he graduated with honors from MSU. So he already has, I guess, many honors under his belt, so this is not unexpected for Joshua. The other people that I'd like to introduce is certainly his parents, who many of you might know, Nick and Mary Clacius, of course, seated behind us, and they have been members of our police reserve since the tornado in 1998. I think Josh might have been a reserve member around that time too. How old were you, Josh? About 12? 6. So I give him a little credit, but I think he had his own reserve uniform, and he's been with us for a very long time. So to move forward, while on patrol during the early morning hours of October 11th of last year, Officer Clacius began to smell smoke. He then began patrolling the area very intensely in an effort to locate the source of the smoke. Josh soon found smoke billowing from a single-family residence. Officer Clacius calmly requested fire department response to that location. He then ran to the front door of the home, discovering it to be unlocked. He opened the front door and was immediately overcome by smoke. He began yelling, "Police, is anyone in here?" Using his flashlight, he moved further into the home. He was only able to see about 8 feet into the smoke. He heard a dog begin to bark and then heard a female voice. He quickly got the woman outside and asked if anyone else was inside. She asked where her son was and attempted to re-enter the home. Officer Clacius told her to stay out in the yard. He then re-entered the residence and now saw flames had engulfed one wall. Officer Clacius was met near the front door by a man cradling the couple's infant son. Officer Clacius asked him if anyone else was in the home. This man quickly said his girlfriend was in the house. Joshua said that she was already safe outside When Josh reunited the family, he confirmed that nobody else was inside the home. In a short period of time, the home became fully engulfed in flames, and as I think everyone here knows, it was a total loss. That home wasn't, now has already been rebuilt. Officer Kalasius's instinct to investigate and quick actions undoubtedly saved the lives of 3 people, all while putting his own life in jeopardy. So for those actions, it's my honor to present Joshua with a life-saving award. That I think we finally got right, Josh.
Joshua, would you like to say a few words?
Just on behalf of the department and the city, I just want to thank everybody for being here and thank the city and thank Chief Peters for this great presentation.
Thank you for your service, and Mom and Dad, thank you for all the things you've done for the community. I think we're going to take a little break in order to take a few pictures.
That'd be great, thank you.
So guys, if you want to just shut us down for a little bit, and we will recess, and we'll be back shortly.
Chief, I don't know if they want to come up by the flag and do that.
Let's do that.
Are we ready? We are back on. Thanks for the little break here. We took a few pictures, and thanks again for Joshua Kalasius and his family. It's really something that came up and comes up during Memorial Day is ordinary people responding in extraordinary ways, and he is definitely an example of that. Next, we will move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda begins in detail on page 10 and concludes with the resolution on page 25, and includes the following budgeted purchases in excess of $7,500. Quality Flow for pump repair for $15,730. We have 1 license renewal for the temporary on-sale liquor to St. Peter Rotary Club at Minnesota Square Park from September 9th, 2017 through September 10th, 2017, plus the regular schedule of disbursements for June 22nd, 2017 through July 5th, 2017. Are there any questions about the consent agenda? If not, is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Any questions now? Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Brandt.
Aye.
Councilmember Carlin.
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Councilmember Graham.
Aye.
Consent agenda is approved. Next, we will go back to the Mason Street vacation under our unfinished business, and Mr. Willoughby.
Mayor Zeman, I won't go through my full report, but we've provided notice of the public hearing, and mailed notice, published notice, posted notice, and there's a resolution prepared that's on page 30 that would honor your petition and accept that and provide for the vacation of the undeveloped portion of Mason Street. We've got the legal description in there. It's probably just to say, easier to say, the undeveloped portion of Mason Street lying east of Sunrise Drive.
Okay. Any questions now for us? If not, the resolution appears on page 30 for the vacation of the undeveloped part of Mason Street. Is there a motion for approval?
Move the resolution, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Any other questions now? Jeff?
I guess, how many other properties are there like this in the city? And, I mean, at some point, would this parcel have been more marketable without a road going through it?
Well, I'll defer to Russ in relation to and I'll let him answer the marketability issue in relation to the number of these without us sitting down and really doing a count. I don't know. I don't think that there are a lot, but there certainly are some areas that are that are platted that are not in use.
But
I don't know that there's value in going through and doing it all in one fell swoop.
But this area was platted before the subdivision was platted, so, you know, at some point it may have been optimistic to think that the industrial park would have gone to the east, but didn't work out that way.
Good point. Okay.
Russ, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, there are, I suppose, a few instances like this. The Lot 2 is about 2 acres, Lot 3 is about 2 acres. We've made no secret. The intent would be ultimately to sell the property to Southwest Minnesota Housing Partnership for Solus. They need a 3-acre lot. So we're going to take the remnant 1 acre from Lot 3 and add that to that undeveloped portion of Mason Street, which would be vacated to create a developable parcel. That will be accomplished in August when you consider a registered land survey.
Any other questions? Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Crum,
Aye.
Mayor Zimmern.
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Councilmember Graham.
Aye.
Councilmember Brand.
Aye.
Resolution is approved. Next, we will move to our 2016 audit. And Todd, I don't know if you want to introduce people here, or?
We'll let Paula do that. Paula helps with the audit, and so I'll
Paula's
get
sitting
everything
back.
going here.
Tonight we have Jim Eichten from MMKR to present our 2016 audit. We have worked with the auditors here beginning back in early January to do some preliminary work. We follow up and finished some final paper changes in April, and the audit work papers have been combined and put into the financial statements by MMKR. And Jim is here. He'll go over some of the details, give you the highlights of what we see as earmarks on a regular basis, and give you a little presentation. If you have any questions afterwards, be happy to answer.
Before he gets going, I do want to mention that the management report and the financial statements will be on our website here before the end of the week, Paula?
Correct, as well as the presentation here tonight.
Come on.
You're up.
Thanks, Paul.
Go beep and I'll hit the slide.
All right. Mayor, members of council, again, my name is Jim Eichten. I'm with MMKR CPAs here to provide a presentation of the audit results for the year ended December 31st, 2016. You'll really need to double click. There's lots of fades in there.
Yeah.
So the first, probably more important part of this presentation is to provide a sense for the role of the auditor. We are required by state statutes to have the city prepare an annual financial statement. That financial statement is then required to be audited by the independent certified public accountant, which is my role in this process. As part of that process, we're required to issue an opinion on your financial statement, as well as test your controls over your financial reporting, test internal controls over the financial report, as well as any sort of related compliance with any laws and regulations over that financial report. We're also then required to test your compliance with Minnesota-specific laws and regulations. We don't test every law, only those laws the state auditor's office provides us with a list of, and they tend to change it based on what things they see in the area around the state. And then lastly, we're required to audit your federal awards, which is called a single audit, if you were to receive more than $750,000. In 2016, you did not receive or exceed that threshold, so that process wasn't complete. So as Todd mentioned, we also issue a management report, and in that management report, it is a presentation tool. It's really my document that summarizes the results of the audit. So on that document on page 1, we start to go through the opinions that I issued. And you can see that in the PowerPoint, I did provide what's called an unmodified opinion on most of the financial statements that was issued. We did issue a modified opinion on the information that relates to the St. Peter Fire Relief Association. The St. Peter Fire Relief Association, which is an independent pension plan of the city, does not follow GASB 68 on pensions. So we do note that in your financial statements, but as it relates specifically to the city's financial statement, we did issue an unmodified or clean opinion. I mentioned the internal control testing. We do continue to report that you have segregation of duties based purely on the size of the city's organization or the size of the accounting department. As part of our audit, we look for and did find adequate compensating controls is what we're looking for. So we really don't suggest any modifications right now in that area, really just to be aware that there was a condition in the segregation duties area. Lastly, I mentioned our testing in the Minnesota legal compliance with the state statutes, and we did report 2 findings. This year we noted as part of the testing of your bids and quotes that you do that one bid did not have adequate contract performance or payment bonds received as part of that process. So you're required in state statutes when you do bidding for certain projects that you are to receive a contract payment bond and a performance bond prior to receiving those bids, and that did not happen. We also reported a finding on advertisement for bids. The city is required to, as part of that same process, advertise in the city's legal newspaper an advertisement of that particular bid, really noting that the bid is taking place. And that particular finding was noted for one contract that we tested this year. Ironically, the same contract applies in both cases. So it really wasn't multiple contracts, it was one that had the finding in those individual cases. So as part of, and that's fine, Todd, you can stay. The important part really of a finding is that the importance of a corrective action plan. The city did write or include in the audit documents a corrective action plan as to the corrections that will be made in the future to eliminate the finding you see there in the future. And as a city council, that's probably the most important part of an audit, really, that your city is taking and finding these findings, taking them with high importance, and putting new procedures in place so that they don't occur again. And really, that's what we found for many years at the city. They take things very seriously when it comes to audits, and we don't anticipate findings to occur in the future on that particular topic, just like last year there was a finding and it was eliminated this year. So in my report, we do provide a lot of other comments and recommendations of comments related to a number of areas. Most notable, probably the last one, we really didn't have any difficulties this year in performing the audit. It really went very smooth and has for any number of years. So the second part of the audit, which I believe I'm starting on the next page, really goes over, you can continue one more time, the financial results. So an audit has 2 parts. Really, how are you doing from a compliance standpoint, which I've addressed already. Secondarily, how are you doing from a financial standpoint? So we started our report really talking about market values. Market values can really start, have a major impact on a city financially, most notably in the collection of property taxes. This particular presentation shows market values over the last 10 years. And you can see a trend line that is very consistent with the state as a whole. Every city that we audit anyway looks identical to this trend. In 2011, which is roughly January 1st of 2019, is the first date you see a downturn in market values, which coincides with the downturn in the economy. Since that time, it continued on multiple years until the economy turned and you're seeing some increases, which in this case was about 7.5% in 2015 and about 4% in 2016, which is very consistent with other cities in this state, as mentioned already. In my presentation, we also talk about tax rates. Tax rates, in this case, is just in a presentation, is really talking about average tax rates. Your city average tax rate is very consistent, again, with statewide averages. In 2016, your average tax rate was 47.3 compared to statewide of 46.5. As a whole, you can see the tax rates were quite a bit different from one year to the next, and the school district has a major impact on that. And I believe there was a referendum probably for the development of a property here in town that's shown very specifically on that particular graph. So what's meaningful to me, though, and going back to the city's tax rate, is generally when you see a consistent average tax rate of that basis, you typically see consistent property tax revenue generation. And if you look at the next graph, you can see, it's the next one after that, we have a presentation that shows revenues on a per capita basis by category. And when you look at the city's property tax revenue on a per capita basis, even though you have a tax rate that's similar to other cities in the state, your overall revenues from that tax rate is actually quite a bit lower than your other cities statewide. Now, why is that? Well, that's the makeup of the city's property. You have properties. You have a significant portion of your property non-taxable. So even though you have the similar tax rate, you're generating quite a bit less revenues on a per capita basis. In total, you're roughly, if you take out the property tax component of that, it's very similar in total to some of the other revenue categories. In 2016, I actually penciled them in. I think it's the rest of the categories other than property taxes were 623, and on a statewide basis it's 627. So it's very similar when you add up the rest of the categories. On the expenditure side of the equation, in the governmental funds, expenditures per capita, you can see your spending on per capita was roughly $691 per resident in 2016. That compares to a $648 in 2015 for the state. One category that stands out that's probably making up the difference is really in park and recreation. And most notably in that category probably has to do with the community center we're actually in today. A lot of cities don't have such a wonderful facility, but in other cases the facility is actually reported separately from a governmental fund. Sometimes you see it as an enterprise fund, similar to your water fund or your sewer fund. So that might be skewing the numbers a little bit. On the bottom of the page, debt service, I always like to look at. It does show a function of how you're managing your debt. You can see in the governmental funds, you have an average per capita spending of $146 compared to statewide, it's about $218. So you're quite a bit below average in the governmental funds anyway. So the city also then has a number of governmental funds. What's one is probably most important is the general fund. The general fund financial position in 2016 improved by about $378,000 this past year, so you didn't see improvements. The city is guided by a fund balance policy that strives to maintain a fund balance of about 35 to 50% of operations. Generally, that's used for cash flow, as the city is only receiving taxes once or twice a year, or twice a year specifically. So at the end of the year, your fund balance as a percentage of your operation ended at 49.7%. So you are within that range that is guided by policy. A couple of other presentations I wanted to point out in the general fund. You can see the general fund's trend line when it comes to the various revenue categories are pretty consistent from year to year. Licenses and permits stands out this year due to some development within the city, but specifically that was quite a bit below average, as below budget this year, as some of the projects were delayed until after 2016. So you're seeing some trends there that are good. And then on the expense side, which is the next graph, you can see a trend line here that is very similar again to other statewide cities. The category where you see it's public safety continues to be a growing expenditure area, probably higher than the other categories. Specifically, that's a need. We have in our public policy, but also it's guided by the great rising costs for police and fire services all over the state. So the last couple of graphs that I wanted to point out relate to the enterprise funds. So the city has quite a few enterprise funds. It's a significant part of the overall city operation. It includes the electric fund, the water fund, and wastewater fund stand out as some of the larger ones. Collectively, the enterprise funds fund balance increased by about $850,000 in 2016. Individually, the individual funds that stand out, and I'll show this one later, in the wastewater fund is probably having the most positive results in terms of operations. In the electric fund, you can see very consistent results over the last 5 years as presented. You see that operating revenues are increasing due to some increased rates and increased usage. But overall, the financial results are very good. The water fund is another fund that's seeing very good operating results. You're seeing some increase in rates, really, that was necessary related to some of the income and loss within those funds. And you can see in 2016, the green line, which is really income before transfers, is above zero, which is a great trend line that I love to see as an auditor. So moving to the next one, you can see the wastewater fund. I'm going to skip that one, Todd, if you want to go to the next one. I don't need to show everyone. But the wastewater fund stands out to me as a fund that really has some positive operating results. And with the level of debt that you have within that wastewater fund, it's important that it is cash flowing positively, which we do continue to see. So I'm going to have you move forward. You can see the trend line in the stormwater fund is good. The last one, really last graph I wanted to point out before going into my summary, really is the, if you want to go to the next one, actually probably stands out more. There we go. The overall operating debt of the city has been a concern of some council members of the past, and we've addressed it as the auditor really by putting some information in front of you that gives you some benchmarking, but also shows some trend lines. I mentioned the governmental funds being in good position when it comes to overall debt service. The enterprise funds probably stand out as having quite a bit more debt, but that relates solely to the operations within those funds. And you can see here that the overall debt service within those funds is declining, and probably most notably is both declining, meaning you're paying off your debt, but also having positive cash flow within those funds as well at the same time. We also want to point out the overall debt load of an average city in the state is about 2468, a little less than 2,500, whereas you can see the city is at about, on a per capita basis, at about 3,706. But that is quite a bit lower than it was 2 or 3 years ago. So some of those trend lines are positive, or all of those are very positive in my point of view. So lastly, I'm going to go to one more, I think. There we go. In summary, I did issue a clean opinion on the basic financial statements with the one qualification on the fire relief. We had the 2 findings on Minnesota legal compliance, which the city has issued a corrective action plan on in terms of how you're going to correct those findings going forward. We certainly see your financial results adhere to the budget projections, and really my last statement, how that is meaningful to the council. Remember, the audit report really reflects data that's 6 months old. You're getting data that's really happening on an ongoing basis, and you really have to rely on that data, assuming that financial results are going to adhere to the final results are going to mimic that budget projections, and we continue to see that in the audit. And as an auditor, I say that with utmost importance. If you can't rely on the final results hitting the budgeted data, it'd be hard to make meaningful decisions. So we certainly are seeing that both in the data we receive, but certainly in the audit process and the information we are getting. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions that you have for me.
Questions for Jim?
Just to clarify Jim's role with the city council, Jim does not work for me, he does not work for Paula, he works for the mayor and the city council. So that's why he's an independent auditor and provides the information directly to you folks, not just to us.
Jeff?
I did have a question on page 7. That would be the government funds revenue per capita.
Okay, yep.
Um,
I think it's in,
It's interesting to me that statewide, things are going down a little bit. We went down, then we trended up a little bit. I guess I'm just kind of curious a little bit, and I know it's broken down per capita, but like special assessments, $3 in 2015 and 2016. And then some of the other categories are more expensive, like the intergovernmental revenues are in the 300 category. I'm just kind of curious if you could shed some light on what special assessments we're talking about.
I'm gonna follow it. You might remember 2014 better than I do.
Right.
Well, I will answer the first question. The intergovernmental revenue can go up and down based on projects. You do have a pretty significant intergovernmental revenue, which is local government aid, which is pretty flat, but you also are getting intergovernmental revenues from various projects or grants or street maintenance projects that go up and down on an annual basis. On the special assessment side, you don't have a lot of revenues, but I think back there might have been a project that was happening. Now I'm testing your
Yeah, for testing my memory here. We have had projects annually. We have not had the magnitude of what we've had a few years back. A few years back, we've had more projects. After the tornado, I believe we had a Washington Avenue project, and those would have been a number of years. Typically, what our assessments are shorter than those 15 years, and not as large. And so it's been some time since we've had some of those larger projects. But that is what that special revenue, assessment revenue would be. What's any of those projects that we had to do improvements, your delinquent utilities, all that kind of stuff are that typical revenue.
Sure, okay.
Let me add one other thing that the council may see that falls into this category on occasion. As you know, whether it's water or sewer or sidewalk correction, we do offer assessment opportunities for many of your folks. And so sometimes they're $500, sometimes they're up to $10,000. On occasion, you'll see those roll through as a project expenditure or something on the consent agenda to hire a contractor to do some of that work. But again, they're usually very small in nature, and we budget a specific amount each year to help folks address those problems.
Okay, perfect.
This pretty much follows in line with our yearly analysis of our financial status. And I guess it's safe to say that we don't have to worry about the mayor making license plates for the state anymore.
I never cared for that job. Anyone else? Now that we heard from Jerry. Steve, I'm sorry.
This is addressed to Todd. I've been going through the major audit for the city, you know, the white 110 pages. I noticed in there the HRA, which would be Parkview Manor. So why would that be listed, but it's all federal dollars that support Parkview Manor? I could see where the, you know, the River's Edge would be included, you know, because it's under the, you know, under the direction of the city. But yet Parkview Manor, it's all federal. So why would that be part of our audit report, you know, for the city?
Let me address it in a little bit different way than you asked the question.
Don't confuse me now,
I'll
Todd.
try very hard not to.
All right.
It is very much akin to the hospital fund. Although it is federal dollars that operates it, it is a subset of the city. The mayor and council make appointment of the HRA members. You have a fiduciary responsibility for the HRA. It's established under your ordinance. It is a commission, committee, board agency of the city, so that's why it's included as part of your audit. They audit separately, but that information then folds into this audit, very similar to what you see with the hospital.
Well, I mean, I'm on the commission, but would the city be involved financially if there were financial issues at Parkview Manor?
Yes.
Okay. All right, that's all I need to know. We may be looking to the city for some money, so.
Anyone else questions for Paula or Jim?
I'd just like to speak for a minute or two more about the debt service that's on page 24. I think you did a good job of outlining that distinction between, what's the first step? Governmental activities versus the enterprise funds. Can you, we do have a slightly different structure than a lot of other communities because of those enterprise funds. And the structure is, of course, a little bit different because of the way that they're self-paying. Can you talk any more about it's not as simple as taking out one half of the equation, but our other governmental activities, the expenses are quite a bit, very dramatically lower than other communities. Can you say anything more about that, or?
Sure, you're on 24.
Yes, I am. So sort of just comparing the top half to the bottom half.
So if you look at the top half right there, you can see that I would focus more on the total. You can see that this is outstanding debt per capita. So in a governmental fund, general fund, special revenue fund, debt service fund, those funds collectively you have $976 of debt per resident. On average in the city overall it's about $1,600. So you're quite a bit below average when it comes to general obligation debt. You can see in the tax increment debt category you're probably above average, but you also have tax increment revenues that are dedicated to pay off those debts when it comes to tax increments. And then general obligation revenues usually have dedicated revenue sources to pay off those general obligation revenues. So that's what I mentioned earlier about the general fund, the governmental fund revenue per capita. You're seeing that the annual revenues are covering the debt service probably quite a bit less than that category area. So it's probably most important if you look at the next one, Todd, and I probably when I look at this one, probably stands out to me is just the amount of debt that you have stands out. You're quite a bit more in those enterprise funds collectively. But what we focus on when it kind of comes to those funds is the city cash flowing? Is there a positive cash flow annually after debt service payments? And in total, I looked at that actually sitting over there in my chair because I know I wanted to have the number in my head, but it's about $500,000 collectively annually positive cash flow when you look at the enterprise funds as a whole this year. And that's been positive cash flowing for a while.
And when you do look at the debt services, you look at the electric, water, wastewater, we've had some major improvements to our infrastructure in those utility funds. Therefore, that debt is a little higher here.
Recent improvements.
Recent, yep. As we've talked in the past, the wastewater fund we know is going to be seeing a decline in their debt service in the near future. So we'll see a change in that time period.
Let me add one other thing. This is meant to be a comparative table of the city of St. Peter to other cities within Minnesota based on a statewide average number. Most cities in the state of Minnesota do not have an electric fund. And so when you remove that number, the numbers get a lot closer. And so that's a significant factor. In relation to your overall debt, I think it's important to note that most cities don't have a hospital. In fact, I think there's maybe just over a dozen municipally owned hospitals. And so the debt that you have there skews the number. So if you look at this from that kind of comparison perspective, there's some things that need a little bit deeper understanding, but I think this is still great information and lets you really know where you're at, which is an important part of this.
I think it would be interesting, I don't know what kind of work this entails, to look at this comparison. Todd, that's a good point that didn't stand out to me, that we're doing a statewide average of several cities that have bigger numbers and a bunch of cities that have zeros for some of those funds. And so it skews things. It would be rather interesting to see a comparison just of communities that have enterprise funds in these various areas and see what our numbers look like compared to those. Is that something that could be done?
Maybe that's something that we can figure out. Maybe Jim and his team have an opportunity based on who they work with to be able to provide us some blind numbers. I don't know what's available through the state auditor's office related to that, but we certainly can pick who the cities are that own hospitals, and we know pretty readily what cities own electric enterprise funds, and so we can maybe get a little something together.
I just know before I was on the council, this was an issue that was pretty completely over my head. I didn't understand the distinction between these. and I didn't understand the revenue sources tied to some of these, or how all of this fit together. So when I talk in the community with folks about debt, usually I have to start with some pretty basic building blocks on some of these things. So I think we can't really overemphasize how we're unique in some of these categories. So thank you for these slides.
Steve?
From my perspective, the numbers don't really mean much relative to the statewide average. Number one, this city is on a river, and our wastewater treatment plant is top of the notch. And when you live on a river, that's an impaired river, your criteria for the discharge is much higher than it would be for other cities. And many other cities in the states that are on the rivers now are looking for federal help because they can't meet the Minnesota Pollution Control discharge issues. And in terms of our water, the city put in an RO system. And many of the cities that I've lived in the past, you couldn't drink the water. At least for someone in a chair, you could not drink the water. And here, anybody that buys bottled water is wasting their money in our city. We have the best water of any community I've ever lived in, and that requires money. So, I mean, that's why, you know, the debt per capita is skewed relative. I mean, you got to compare apples to apples. So.
And I agree with you on both of those points.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Anyone else? If not, the resolution accepting the 2016 financial statements together with the independent auditor's report appears on page 33. Is there a motion for approval?
I'll make that motion, Mr. Mayor.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Any other questions or comments? Call the roll, please.
Mayor Zinni,
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer,
Aye.
Councilmember Graham,
Aye.
Councilmember Brand,
Aye.
Councilmember Carlin.
Aye.
Resolution passes. Next up, we have, thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Paula, again, I believe, with a different folder. She's going to talk to us about computer server.
Mayor and council, I have a unbudgeted purchase here. We have evaluated our software to the point where we cannot support it any longer. The Exchange server that we use, our Outlook, our emails, our functions of that, the server is typically a 3 to 5 year life, and we purchased this last in 2008. So we would like to upgrade that, along with the software for Microsoft Exchange product. We have the 2007 version, which has been, it is no longer supported as of April 2017. And in order to come to the current version of Microsoft Exchange, there is actually 3 versions that we are needing to pass through to get to the latest version. And in order to do that, our computer software staff, Leon Quorum, has put together a 2-step process to be able to install this to get to the version 2016. So we have put out for formal written proposals. We have put a notice on our website for getting information back. We did receive 2 proposals, and we are suggesting that we would like to go with the Computer Technology Solutions for $26,942. The funding from this would be available through our various funds being split up based on our computer services needs with the general funds and then the utility funds. Once the approval of this is, like it says, we can go through the process. It is going to be a little bit of time before we get to that version, but we can get started on that immediately. The resolution is on page 36, and again, this includes the server, the software installation, and licensing for the complete service.
Question, Jeff?
So I've got a question on this, Paula, because this is a little different than us looking at a bid for asphalt or Ford versus a Chevy. We're asking for the like materials, like type of thing, and it came back with 2 different proposals that much different in price.
Mm-hmm.
Any idea why it came back that different in price?
You know, it was just like a matter of each version. The items, the scope that was listed of each of them, they just seem to be that much a little bit higher in each of them, and when you do the different components, it just had that spread grow. There wasn't anything that stuck out in my mind. There wasn't a different idea that they wanted to go with. It was just a matter of those costs being higher in the second proposal.
Okay.
If I could add just one other item. Certainly proximity might have an impact because there's a training and installation component that's a part of this. And one is within about 15 miles of you and one's a little bit further away. And so there's time and money invested in that. Is that the difference? That's not the whole difference, but that probably has a little bit of an impact.
Okay.
Steve?
Paula, I've always felt that the foundation of all human virtues is truthfulness. So if I read this and I told you that I understand anything that I read, I would not be telling you the truth. But the only thing I'm confused on, why, and I don't disagree that it's necessary, but why wouldn't this have been included in the initial budget for 17? And then a follow-up question, would this be funded then through a equipment purchase certificate, or no?
No, we are planning to use this within our own budgets that we're using in 2017 or the use of reserves.
Okay.
The reason it wasn't in the 2017 budget is we have a history of trying to make do with what we have. And we have supported this. We have a great team that does our computer services. And so we've gotten to this far, and it's like we've noticed incidents of devices not being compatible. There's different patches that are coming through that are causing more glitches. And so we figured this is the best time we should probably move.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. We are very fortunate to have Leon Corum. I have worked with him for many years in Wilmer, and that guy can make a sledgehammer operate with a few tweaking on a computer. So yes, the city is very fortunate to have him.
To expand just a little bit on Paula's commentary, the exchange that you use currently works. The struggle is, as we have other software that comes onto your system, it can't work with that new software. And so things glitch, they don't connect, you can't send an email, you can't do many of the things that are necessary as a part of your regular business to make this stuff go. Data doesn't want to flow back and forth between those software versions. And so us catching up Microsoft Exchange will not only help with that, but it will help these other things run better as well.
Okay, thank you.
Part of the ongoing cost of doing business.
Correct?
Todd, I agree with all of that, but I get back kind of what Steve's question was. Weren't we aware of that when budget time was? Or is that something we don't have enough time to look that far in advance? Because Paula said something about March of 2017, that one item became incompatible.
The
Or
support.
they don't support it
They just
anymore.
don't support it as of April 2017.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know when the announcement was made for lack of support. We can look that up for you.
No, that's fine.
But
But
yeah.
like I say, I just think that a lot of this is, could have been budgeted and may have changed some other things down the road, as far as, we seem to be looking for 26,000, 27,000 here, and I remember we were bouncing around $50,000 numbers during budgeting time, so that was just my concern.
Fair comment.
And again, it's not to say that some of these costs might not be absorbed in already our current budget plan.
Okay, all right. Anyone else? If not, the resolution authorizing unbudgeted purchase of Exchange server along with software, installations and licensing appears on pages 36 and 37. Is there a motion for approval?
So move, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Any other questions or comments? Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Councilmember Grahams.
Aye.
Councilmember Brand.
Aye.
Councilmember Carl.
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye. Resolution passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. Next up, we have Mr. Willie again for a revolving loan request.
Mayor Zeman, members of the City Council, you received a revolving loan request from Building Good Communities LLC. Building Good Communities is comprised of Dave Schoof and Scott Fee, and I'll say the respective spouses. Can't remember Mrs. Schoof's first name. Apologies. They purchased the 419 South Minnesota Avenue building. That's the former Armory facility. They are repurposing the structure. Daniel Dinsmore from Dinsmore Photography in Mankato will be a tenant of the property, and he intends to open the Capitol Room as an event center, a place where you could hold a high school reunion, or you could hold a wedding dance, or an Amway convention, or something of that nature. The Planning and Zoning Commission and the Board of Zoning Appeals then have provided a conditional use permit for the operation, establishing certain conditions. The owners are going to be undertaking certain roof repairs. The tenant is undertaking certain leasehold improvements, and he has brought in a couple subcontractors to work with him on that project. But to occupy the building as public assembly, it's necessary to put in a fire suppression system. Every attempt was made by the owners to try to avoid it. Perhaps there could be exemptions for historic buildings. Perhaps there could be exemptions for buildings on the National Register. There are not. So they are now looking to put in the fire suppression system. It would require the extension of a 6-inch water service from Front Street. That has been quoted at $44,000. It would require $55,586 of interior pipe fitting then for the sprinkler distribution within the building, for a total project of just under $100,000. Minstar Bank has approved a $49,793 loan, or 50% of the loan. The request from the EDA then would be at the 40% allowed by your policy, or $39,834. And again, according to your policy, the owner would contribute a minimum of 10%, or $9,959 towards the project. The EDA had reviewed the matter at their special meeting on July 6th. I should say first that the personal financials of the principals were reviewed by a subcommittee of the EDA prior to the full meeting on the 6th. At the meeting on the 6th, the EDA has recommended that you would approve a loan to Building Good Communities for the partial financing of the installation of a fire suppression system at 419 South Minnesota Avenue. The resolution that would be prepared contains 6 components. One is the approval of a $39,834 loan. The second would be establishment of interest at 4.25%, which is the Wall Street Journal US Prime at this point. The notes amortized on a 20-year schedule with a 5-year balloon payment. That would be subject to a subordinate mortgage recorded against the property. That personal guarantees from all 4 principal owners of Building Good Communities be acquired. And then in this particular instance, given that the owner has engaged subcontractors and the tenant has engaged subcontractors in the project, I consulted with Chris Green, the assistant city attorney, who I believe then interrupted the city attorney's vacation to ask him a question. And it was determined that it would be appropriate to get lien waivers then from the subcontractors to perfect our mortgage. In the absence of lien waivers, if subcontractors go unpaid, they can record a lien against the property, and then that would precede our subordinate mortgage. So, Mr. Mayor, I'd answer any questions that you or the members of the council might have.
Okay. Anyone? Steve? Oh, I thought your hand was going up, sorry. Jeff?
When a loan is approved, at what point do we lock in rate? And second of all, I guess my question is, is that rate something that they agree to ahead of us meeting, or is it something that they sign and agree to after we meet?
Well, they are aware, because they have copies of our loan guidelines, that we established interest rate at US Prime.
Mm-hmm.
The previous had been, you really didn't have a policy, but the default was a 3%.
Yep.
There had been instances where you did 6.5%. There had been instances where you'd done 0%. So the EDA was looking for some consistency into that. Why would I give you a 3, Jeff, and I'd give Councilman Pfeiffer a 4?
Mm-hmm.
And in the banking industry, given that you have some bank representation on the board, that's just frowned upon. It's that uniformity. So yes, they're well aware of that interest rate beforehand, but your policy still does provide opportunity to go below that if there's a compelling reason. I always refer to it as the trifecta: a large number of jobs, a large utility consumption, and a large tax capacity. If you can hit those, I think it perhaps warrants a little bit lower interest rate. But yes, they're fully aware of the 4.25% that's being offered. We would lock in upon sending in loan offer sheet or the approval sheet to them. I would lock in at 4.2. Some others may say that, you know, at the time of closing, but to give them some assurance and give some ability to put together some cash flows and such, 4.25.
And so since the EDA saw this first, is that when the 425 came into play?
Well, the 425, it's published every Monday in the Wall Street Journal.
Okay.
It is at a 52-week high at this point.
Mhm.
A year ago, it was about 3. Then it did jump to 3.25, and that was really the first movement in a long period of time. So it is some volatility in there, and it has been ticking up. But it is reflected, it is indexed, and EDA thought that would be a more appropriate, rather than, I won't say willy-nilly, but a shotgun approach where, you know, the rules are different for different people.
Right.
But because we're not buying these funds on, or getting these funds on the open market, they're the EDA funds, we can lock in at that 4.25 to the borrower at that time. We don't sit and adjust it after the fact.
Exactly, because the 3% really wasn't indexed to any particular
Right.
number at all.
Sure. Steve?
Russ, on your narrative, you mentioned this 409 South Washington, or South Minnesota.
You built, oh, pardon me. I'll
Is
let you
that
finish
the
your question.
small building next, north of that building, that, are they gonna tear it down? Is that the
Building Good Communities owns the Armory property, and then they owned the residence that lies north of the alley, as they own then the property up to Farm Bureau. That is phase 2 of the event center, and they believe that next year they would like to incorporate some outdoor space. If someone wanted to have an outdoor reception, perhaps a very nice arch flowered fence or a gazebo, outdoor liquor service or something of that nature, that would require an extension or expansion of their conditional use permit, and they'll go back to the Board of Zoning Appeals just as they did. Now, they also own the former Carnegie Library on the corner, and that's it's owned by the same LLC. It's a separate property that may or may not be brought into, incorporated with the operations of the Armory, perhaps as a staging area for a bridal party or something of that nature, or a smaller venue for a garden club tea or something of that nature. So yes, and originally it appeared we were going to have to mortgage against the 409, 419, and the Carnegie Library, but the appraisal that was presented, dated from March, established a value substantial enough that we wouldn't have to encumber the other properties.
You know, I suspect you can't answer this, but are they well, I know, of course it's a stupid question, but I'm asking it anyway, but are they anticipating generating that kind of revenue to pay these kinds of debts that they have here?
They're pretty experienced business persons.
yeah, yeah.
It's pretty experienced property owners. I have had an opportunity to review the lease, and when we look at the lease revenues, taxes last year were $10,700. Then you'd want insurance paid out of that, and any building maintenance. Well, a lot of the building maintenance is deferred to the tenant as a leasehold obligation. So, yeah, I believe the EDA members were comfortable that it did cash flow appropriately.
Well, I'm happy that someone is willing to take this on. I mean, it's a really wonderful building from the outside.
None of my children have been married yet, but I understand these venues are $2,500, $3,000 for the event. So if you can have a couple of them a month or 3 of them a month, I think your cash flow can be accomplished.
Well, maybe we could marry Jerry off again.
Nobody'd have me.
Oh, okay.
Anybody else? Russ, I have it's not really a question, it's just a observance. This building, you know, this is fine, but it seems like we're getting, the EDA anyway, or maybe just us in general too, we're getting a lot of requests for people kind of after the fact, after they buy something. And I know you can't do anything about it, but we got this one, we've got the one down by Arby's that, you know, they bought it and, you know, didn't even look into really, I don't think, what they could do with it. So I'm just, you know, the EDA hasn't been asked for a lot here, but I'm just kind of concerned that if we get people buying things and then all of a sudden there's not enough equity in it, and like I say, I know you can't do anything but equity in it for the EDA to help them out, you know, I get a concern with that we're going to have maybe some properties that aren't gonna be able to withstand, like, Steve said, how are you gonna support this?
It's been expressed to them, Mayor, that I cannot guarantee that the city council will provide a nickel of financing. So in the absence of any municipal financing, they'd better be able to go dig in some couch cushions
Right.
or
But I-
seek financing from
yeah.
private parties or something.
I just get concerned that they buy these properties and then all of a sudden, oh, you know, they want to come to us that they want to do this. Well, you can't do that, you know, or, you know, especially down there. And that's just an observance, like I say.
For my
Suzie.
part, I think that the individuals involved in this project are fairly experienced.
Right.
And this was maybe not just a case of them being, I don't think this is a case of lack of experience. This was just a rule that was not readily apparent to them.
Right.
And so
And they didn't ask us for any money to begin with to buy
Right.
the building, so it's their prerogative.
I think their intention had been to do this without EDA funds, but this kind of caught them unawares, and
Right.
so they needed to come back. And so, in my mind, this is a great example of how this should work, because here are some individuals who are willing to put in their own money, and when they hit a road bump,
Yeah, no,
we were able to
this
come
is
through.
exactly how the EDA is supposed to work.
Yeah.
To me, it is anyway. But like I say, I just get concerned with property owners that, you know, business is good in St. Peter, that, hey, we're gonna buy this and do this, that you aren't looking into the total project, you know, and what it allows beforehand. And like I say, I know you can't do anything about it, it just concerns me. So, anyone else? If not, the resolution approving the $39,834 revolving loan to Building Good Communities for the property located at 419 South Minnesota Avenue appears on pages 40 and 41. Is there a motion for approval?
Move the resolution, Mr. Mayor.
second.
Any other questions or comments? Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Graham,
Aye.
Councilmember Brand,
Aye.
Councilmember Cullen,
Aye.
Mayor Zima.
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Resolution passes. Next up, we have a TIF, Tax Increment Financing District, public hearing request.
Mayor Zeman, members of the city council, as part of the potential, intended redevelopment of the Mary's Flowers property in the 1115 South Minnesota Avenue property, the residential home immediately north of Mary's Flowers. The developer is planning for a strip mall type development at that location. He attempted to put together a development that included only the Mary's Flowers property. It was determined it was not sufficiently sized, and so that necessitated, if the project was going to move forward, the acquisition of an additional property as well as then a rezoning of that property. Recognizing those additional costs, staff had been in conversations with the developer about providing a tax increment benefit, restricted to the demolition of the two residents or two structures, and then the utility connections and disconnections necessary for the alteration of the development. There is a resolution that's been prepared that would set a date of public hearing on tax increment district number 1-22 within municipal development district number 1. It would qualify as a redevelopment tax increment district, given that the building official has undertaken inspections of the two structures, and they meet the threshold as to the amount of investment that would be necessary to bring them up to the current codes that are available. The TIF plan is still being finalized. We're still finalizing the very final site plan, which then will help determine what the utility cost of disconnection and connection are. We are not anticipating providing tax increment reimbursement for the other numerous eligible expenses, and I'm not anticipating that they would seek any type of additional financing from the Economic Development Authority. Mayor Strand. Dang it. Mayor
That's all
Zeman, I
right.
apologize. I got it written down in 3 places. Mayor Zeman, I apologize, and I'd answer any questions you may have.
Anyone? Steve?
Russ, is this, maybe it's a question dual for yourself and Mr. Prathke, but is this common for the city to initiate a TIF district for a private business like this?
Yeah, it
is.
has happened, yes.
Okay. I mean, I'm more familiar with the housing developments, parks, school, that type of thing, but at least in my short time on the council,
Yep.
have we done this
The,
before?
The Creation Technology Industrial Building was built by a private entity using tax increment financing.
You have a number of these. You have a number of them. It's not unusual for you to do that. As we look at it from a staff perspective, our goal is to minimize the amount of increment that you provide while trying to meet the goals of the council and having a redevelopment in that area that's appropriate, that divides the commercial type use and the residential type use, that provides for the appropriate utility connections is important. And we use this not only as a benefit to potential developers, but frankly also as a carrot to make some of these things go in the way that you would like to see them move forward. And that's how we look at it.
So would this be extended then, up to 26 years?
No, it will no, under no circumstances will be extended 20 years. That's the maximum for a redevelopment district. The demolition of the Gatsky home, an individual home, was about $12,000, so I'm anticipating $25,000 to $30,000 for the demolition of the structures. Again, the utilities will be determined. The TIF plan will have a specific dollar amount in it, and once the developer is reimbursed that amount, they're not afforded any further benefit from it. I'm not familiar with the greater TIF law and how things can be transferred and funds could be moved to another redevelopment TIF. That's well beyond me. It's a Shannon Sweeney and maybe a Paula question. But it would be a pay-as-you-go, so we would have no ongoing obligation if they quit paying their taxes. The city wouldn't have to pony up any money at all to provide any further reimbursement. This is recognizing that the two structures as they exist now have a taxable value, but when they're demolished and it's redevelopment, there will be a significant increase. Well, an increase, significant certainly is subjective, but it will have an increase, and so they will receive the benefit of the increased taxation up to 90% of that annual amount. Will it take 10% to pay for our administrative costs of Paula and the accounting, for Shannon Sweeney's tax plan preparation, and so we should also be fully reimbursed for our expenses that we've gone in by being able to take 10. I can't tell you today it's going to generate $15,000 annually in tax increment. We will have that before the plan is considered and adopted.
Okay, thank you.
Shopko was a TIF district we
Yes, it was.
established, or that area.
Oh,
Yeah,
All right.
and similar kind,
I think it was
redevelopment
one
district.
of the
Okay.
later
Yep.
ones that we've
And of
done,
course, I
Jeff.
think our biggest TIF districts are the housing ones.
Yeah.
So I guess just, excuse me, just a comment I'd like to make, because I think I'm not the only one in the community that feels this way. I guess I'm a bit ashamed and embarrassed that this property looks the way it does, and it's gonna continue to look that way for another month and a half before we have this meeting, before we actually have the first wrecking ball whack. A lot of people drive by this property on a daily basis, and I do hear some comments, and I feel embarrassed that that's in our front step as people drive through our community. I really feel strongly that we ought to have some sort of regulations on a minimum amount of maintenance for a property in the community. And I think that this property has gone too far in the wrong direction for this to continue to be the case in the future. That's all I'll make for comments.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jeff. It reminds me of the guy on the north end of town that had his driveway covered up with plastic for a year or whatever it was, and it's the same thing. You know, if people say, "What are you doing now?" So, whatever we can, you know, I don't know if they've taken out a demo permit, which I think they had to do. Isn't there a time limit on that for doing that?
We don't have any type of minimum maintenance effort requirement in our ordinance. So the circumstances surrounding the closing of Mary's Flower certainly are tragic.
Yeah.
And so it was unanticipated. I think anytime we're going to have type of development and progress or redevelopment, you're going to have some hiccups, move forward and move backward. I don't think this is necessarily unique to St. Peter. Hopefully this will take care of it. We'll have a demo, and you know, perhaps something very similar might be happening on the Shell station, you know, to get those improved also. That's another one that's probably going to need some attention and hopefully a redevelopment. So
The problem I have is now we have this TIF request, and it's almost like they're, hey, to me, hey, approve this TIF so we can get rid of it, and that shouldn't be the case.
yeah, the work that they've done up to date has not required a demolition permit. So I don't know if that was actually accomplished by the previous owners, or if that's accomplished by the current owners, or if the previous owner said, well, they got to tear it down, take what you want. Oh, I couldn't answer that. I'm not
Okay.
aware of those circumstances.
All right. Susan?
Well, I don't know that it would be directly addressed. I think that this issue of the appearance of the facility reminds me of our conversations about gateway overlay districts and the value of some sort of minimum standards for the appearance of buildings in the primary, most visible parts of our community. So maybe it's time to talk about that again sometime.
Okay, Steve?
Relative to your comment, I agree with what you're saying, Mr. Mayor, and Mr. Brand and Ms. Garland, but I'd like to take it to more of a global issue relative to the condition of some of the houses that I've seen in our community. I mean, I went by today by one, and I've been by it several times. It should be used for a haunted house. I mean, it's just pathetic. The windows are broken out of it. The doors are half hanging there, and yet, boy, I can't believe that we don't have some type of an ordinance that would apply to something like, I mean, it's a nightmare to see. I mean, it's absolutely disgusting to look at. And, I mean, if, you know, so we should look at something more of a global perspective, or say, in our city. But I understand the concept of our gateway district. That truly is important. Yeah, it really is.
Anyone else? If not, the resolution calling for a public hearing for the creation of a tax increment financing district, number 1-22, appears on page 43. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Any other questions or comments? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Brand,
Aye.
Councilmember Crawley,
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer,
Aye.
Councilmember Graham.
All right.
Resolution passes. Thank you, Russ. Next up, we have the tree worker license application. We just keep these in for every time, don't we?
Yeah, I don't know if this is the 87th
Seventh
one
one.
that you have. I didn't check, but you're more
You
than a
didn't check
dozen
yet?
here. I didn't.
You should have been prepared.
I should have
Come
been
on.
prepared. Brad Hack has submitted an application, and we didn't find anything in his background check that would prohibit him from receiving a tree worker's license. So the information starts on page 44 with the resolution on page 45 within your packet.
Questions? You know, I don't have a question. It's just, you know, I see these so often, and I just looked at it and I thought, Barb Hack, why is Barb Hack running a tree worker? So, Brad Hack, sorry. The resolution for a tree worker license for Mr. Hack appears on page 45. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Any questions, comments? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Crawley,
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer,
Aye.
Councilmember Graham,
Aye.
Councilmember Brand.
Aye.
Resolution passes. That concludes our new business. Next, we have reports. The only thing that I have was 4th of July, and I don't think I'm telling anybody anything new by the amount of people who were there, because almost everybody must have been there. So I heard from the Last Man Club that they handed out 10,000 of the little flags. Last year it was 9,000, and I know there's a lot of people this year in the 10,000 that didn't get them, you know, over and above that. The park was jammed, very busy, and everybody looked like they were having a good time. That's all I've got.
Mayor members, I have the ones that are listed and just a couple other brief ones. First, I want to cover the solar program event. Many of you were at that event, and so there's information included on our webpage. This is the solar subscription program that you approved, and so it continues to move forward, and people will find more information in the hot sheet, again, on our website. And if they have questions, they should certainly feel free to give us a call. It's a wonderful opportunity for people to subscribe to a solar garden or solar farm, sometimes we call it. So I think we had actually had a better turnout than I thought we'd have, and so that was fantastic and receptive, and a lot of people had great questions, and so I thought just a really nice meeting overall. So if people have more questions or want to participate, please let us know. We'll be happy to help them out. Also want to mention that there's a Minnesota River Valley Transit Board meeting coming up, not tomorrow, Tuesday, but on Wednesday the 12th here in the Governor's Room at 2:30. Susie and Steve are your members that are appointed to that in cooperation with LeSueur. So the packets went out at the end of last week, and they're also included on our website if people want to know more about Minnesota Regional Valley Transit System. The July 17th workshop location, as you know, we've been trying to change those workshop locations based on some of your discussion and some recommendations that you saw. My recollection is this one, because of a scheduling issue, is going to be at the library conference room, I think. No, it's going to be St. Peter Room, or Governor's Room. I'm sorry, Governor's Room. So watch that, Governor's Room, not in the St. Peter Room, here at the Governor's Room. Just two other quick ones. I don't know whether to say this week or next week is the first week of every week recycling. We had recycling this week, so today is Monday, so if you're watching this on Tuesday or Wednesday, it's your recycling day, get your recycling out. But next week would have been an off week. In the future, of course, recycling will be every week moving forward, so we want to make folks aware of that. Mr. Mayor, I think that's the last thing that I have, other than there's a lot of street construction going on, so make sure you're checking out your route in advance, and please give all the crews, not only ours, but the contractors, room as they do their work to make sure that the streets are looking good and are reconstructed within our community. There's a lot of work going on, so watch out there.
Steve?
Todd, on that solar program, I'm sorry I didn't make it, but do you have anybody sign up?
We have had a couple folks sign up,
Okay.
yes. I can't tell you off the top of my head how many panels we have that people have subscribed to, but yeah, and it's not a one-time deal. People could sign up next week or 6 months from now. And the plan is that it's an ongoing program. Certainly it's summertime, and so people are preoccupied or maybe occupied with lots of other things, but there's great information out there, and again, we're happy to help folks.
And I have one final comment, just to let our mayor know that if he tends to run in the future, my 5-year-old grandson was looking out the window the other day, and he yelled at me, and he said, "There goes the mayor." And I looked, I said, "No, that's not the mayor." And that's not the mayor, so.
Okay.
All right, just let you know, you got young people coming out looking for
Oh,
it.
there you go.
That's right.
As long as they don't have a badge and a warrant, I'm fine. Susie?
I just want to say a word or two. When I was hoping to say this while Officer Clasius was here with his family, but if you don't mind, I'd like to just say a couple of things that came to mind about his story. And it's I have a couple personal comments, but I promise I'll make them relevant. In the spring of 2013, as a lot of you know, our neighbor's house burned down. It was destroyed. And our house and another neighbor's house were both damaged in that fire as well. Not significantly. But when I read the story in the newspaper originally, it really hit hard because at the time of that fire, my husband and I had a 6-month-old child and found ourselves evacuating in the middle of the night. And I reflected upon it a little bit, and the sensation of when you run into your baby's room and you see flames out his bedroom window has to be one of the lowest lows of your life. The fear that you feel at that moment, it's just an indelible memory for me that I will just never forget. But I want to contrast that for a moment. So, there we are running around the house, grabbed our jackets, grabbed the baby, and ran out the front door, really very fearfully. And when I opened the front door, another member of our police force, Officer Wenzel, was standing on our doorstep, pounding on the door, alerting us and probably getting ready to break into the house if that was what was needed. From going from that intense fear to opening the door and thinking, how did you get here so fast? And how did you know what was going on? And I'm so glad to see you. Was just such a swing of emotions in a very, very rapid amount of time. It gave me this sense of hope at a moment of a lot of hopelessness. In our case, everybody in all 3 of the affected homes was able to evacuate before getting to a situation of greater danger. Our fire department responded quite quickly and were able to at least save our home and one other neighbors as well. But as I think about this, there's a lot of discussion at the national level right now, and perhaps reasonably a lot of scrutiny of our law enforcement and our emergency responders. And I think those are important conversations to have. But I think that in those moments when you are fearing for your life, fearing for your family, to be able to see that person responding and know they're a representative of our city and they're here to help, and to know that someone's taking care of you, that should be the ideal. And I'm very proud to have people like Officer Clasius in our community who are really embodying that spirit. And so, again, this is a very personal issue for me, and it's one that I will talk about anytime someone wants to ask me about the value of our emergency responders when we need them. So hopefully this message will trickle down to Officer Clasius and his family, and I just wanted everybody else hearing tonight to really think about how important those services are and how important it is that we get that right. So thank you for just letting me say
you.
those few words.
Thank you. Anyone else? If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
All in favor of adjourning, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? We are adjourned.
Get all these.
I can't imagine not.
Well, that are.